The year is 1912. In the hills outside of Rome stands an old Renaissance villa known as Villa Mondragone. For centuries, the building had served as a Jesuit college, a place where scholars lived, studied, and carefully preserved thousands of rare historical books. Inside its quiet library sat shelves filled with ancient documents known as manuscripts. A manuscript is simply a book written entirely by hand. Long before the printing press existed, every book had to be copied manually by scribes, page by page, word by word. Many of these manuscripts were centuries old. Some contain religious texts, others scientific writings, medical knowledge, or even early works of philosophy. By the early 20th century, collectors across Europe had begun searching for these forgotten books, not just for their value, but for the pieces of history they contained. One of those collectors was a rare book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich. Voynich had spent years travelling across Europe, visiting monasteries, libraries, and universities in search of lost manuscripts. He had already uncovered several valuable texts during his career, but in 1912, whilst examining a small collection of manuscripts being sold quietly by the Jesuit college at Villa Mondragone, he found something unusual. At first glance, it looked like any other medieval book. The pages were made of thin parchment, the writing was neat and consistent, and the ink had faded slightly with age. But when Voynich began studying the text more closely, he noticed something very strange. The writing did not resemble Latin, it wasn't Greek, nor was it Arabic or Hebrew. In fact, he couldn't even recognise the illustrations either. The book appeared to be written in a language that no one had ever seen before. Voynich purchased the manuscript and brought it to scholars immediately for examination. What they would soon discover would transform the book into one of the greatest unsolved puzzles in history. A manuscript written more than 600 years ago in a language that no one on earth had ever been able to read. This is the story of the Voynich Manuscript. Wilfrid Voynich was born in Lithuania in 1865, then part of the Russian Empire. His early life was anything but ordinary. As a young man, Voynich studied chemistry and became involved in revolutionary political movements that opposed the Russian government. Eventually, his activities led to his arrest. He was imprisoned by the authorities and sent to a remote prison in Serbia, but Voynich managed to escape. After fleeing Russia, he eventually settled in Western Europe, where he began rebuilding his life. Over time, he developed a fascination with rare and ancient books. By the late 1800s, he had become a respected rare book dealer, travelling across the continent searching for forgotten texts hidden in old libraries. It was this search that eventually led him to Villa Mondragone in 1912. The Jesuit scholars there were quietly selling some of their rare manuscripts to raise money for the college. Voynich was invited to examine the collection. Among the books, one immediately caught his attention, not because of its value, but because of how strange it was. The manuscript contains roughly 240 surviving pages. Every page is filled with flowing handwritten text, written in a script that scholars now call Voynichese. At first glance, the writing looked convincing, almost natural. Words repeat in patterns, sentences appear structured, and paragraphs run neatly across the parchment as though the author were writing in a real language. No historian could match the script to Latin, it wasn't Greek, and it wasn't Arabic or Hebrew. However, the symbols themselves are completely unfamiliar. There are looping characters, curved strokes, and strange shapes that resemble letters, yet belong to no known alphabet. In fact, it appeared to belong to no known writing system at all, but the writing was only part of the mystery. Scattered throughout the manuscript were dozens of strange illustrations, drawings that seemed to divide the book into several different sections. Some pages showed detailed botanical drawings, plants with roots, stems, and leaves. Others contained circular star charts and zodiac diagrams, surrounded by the same strange text. In another part of the manuscript, rows of strange jars and containers appeared, as if describing medicines or even ingredients. And, perhaps most unusual of all, were pages filled with small human figures bathing in green pools, connected by elaborate networks of pipes and channels. Each section appeared to describe a different subject: plants, astronomy, medicine, perhaps even the human body itself. Yet, without understanding the language, the meaning of these illustrations remained completely unknown. To solve the mystery of the Voynich Manuscript, scholars realised they would first need to solve the greatest puzzle of all: the writing. While linguists struggled to understand the strange writing, historians began examining the manuscript's illustrations more closely. The drawings seemed to divide the book into several distinct themes. The first and largest section appears to focus on plants. Each page contains a single detailed botanical illustration, often accompanied by paragraphs of text. At first glance, the drawings resemble the herbal guides used by medieval doctors, but when botanists studied the images carefully, they encountered a problem. Most of these plants could not be identified. Some appear similar to real species, but only partially. Others seem to combine features from several plants at once, and a few look like they belong to no known species at all. Another section of the manuscript appears to focus on astronomy and astrology. These pages are filled with circular diagrams of stars, constellations, and zodiac symbols. Some of these zodiac symbols are recognisable, figures that resemble Pisces, Taurus, and other constellations, but once again, the surrounding text offers no explanation. Further into the manuscript is a section that many researchers refer to as the pharmaceutical pages. Here, rows of unusual jars and containers appear across the parchment. Beside them are drawings of roots, leaves, and plant fragments, as if describing ingredients or preparations. It resembles a kind of medieval medicine guide. But again, without understanding the text, the purpose of these pages remain uncertain. Then there is perhaps the strangest section of the entire manuscript. Across dozens of pages are small drawings of nude women bathing in green liquid. They appear inside pools connected by pipes and channels that weave all across the page. Some researchers believe these diagrams represent early medical theories about the human body. Others believe they may symbolise natural processes or alchemical ideas. But, without being able to read the text, no one knows for certain. The manuscript clearly contains knowledge of some kind, but what knowledge it holds remains locked within its pages. For many years, scholars debated whether the manuscript had been created. Some believed it might have been a late forgery, perhaps from the 16th or 17th century, and others suspected it could be genuine medieval work. In 2009, scientists finally performed radiocarbon dating on the parchment. The results were decisive. The pages were produced sometime between 1404 and 1438, which meant the manuscript was over 600 years old. Hundreds of pages, a consistent writing system, detailed illustrations, all created by hand in an era when parchment itself was expensive and difficult to produce. Whoever wrote this lived during the late medieval period, a time long before modern cryptography, long before printing presses became widespread. So if the manuscript was a hoax, it would have been an extraordinary one. During the Second World War, some of the code breakers who helped crack the Nazi encryption even studied the manuscript, and they were also unable to decipher it. Over the past century, many of the world's brightest minds have attempted to decode the Voynich Manuscript, whether that be linguists, historians, or even professional cryptographers. In recent years, researchers have used computers and artificial intelligence to analyse the strange text. Algorithms have searched for patterns within the language, but even with modern technology, the manuscript has refused to give up its secrets. No one has ever successfully translated it, not a single word, not a single sentence, nothing. Despite this, over the past century, countless attempts have been made to explain the origin of the Voynich Manuscript. Some theories are grounded in history, others are far more unusual. The most widely accepted explanation is that the manuscript may be a medieval scientific or medical text. During the 15th century, scholars were experimenting with herbal medicine, astronomy, and early theories about the human body. The strange plants illustrated in the book could represent medicinal herbs. The star charts could describe astronomical observations, and the bathing figures connected by pipes may be symbolic diagrams of how the human body functions. If this theory is correct, then the manuscript could simply be a scientific work written in a private language or cipher designed to keep its knowledge a secret. Another possibility is that the manuscript is a complex code. Alchemists in the medieval world often disguise their writings to protect their discoveries. If the Voynich text is encrypted, it may contain instructions, formulas, or even experiments that were intentionally hidden from outsiders. But not every explanation is quite so conventional. Some researchers have suggested the manuscript may be written in an entirely invented language, a language designed by its author from scratch, completely with its own grammar, vocabulary, and structure. If that was true, the book might represent one of the earliest examples of a constructed language ever created. There are, however, some far stranger ideas. Some people believe the manuscript may contain knowledge from a lost tradition of science or medicine, ideas that were forgotten as history moved forwards. Others have suggested the illustrations might represent plants that once existed but have since disappeared, or symbolic diagrams of natural processes that we no longer recognise. And then there are theories that venture even further into speculation. Over the years, some have proposed that the manuscript may contain knowledge far ahead of its time. Ideas about biology, astronomy, or chemistry that medieval scholars somehow discovered but were unable to fully explain. If that were true, it would mean the book might contain information that humanity has yet to rediscover. But there is also a far simpler possibility. The manuscript may be nothing more than an elaborate hoax. A clever author may have created hundreds of pages of convincing nonsense, symbols arranged to look like a language, and illustrations designed to imitate scientific diagrams. If that were the case, the Voynich manuscript would be one of the most ambitious literary deceptions ever attempted. Yet, even this explanation leaves questions unanswered. Why would someone in the 15th century spend years creating such a detailed and intricate book for no clear purpose? And with that, the mystery still remains. A manuscript filled with writing, illustrations that hint towards knowledge, and a message that after more than 600 years, no one has been able to read. This is the story of the Voynich Manuscript.